Another day of clashes in Bethlehem followed the funeral of a 13-year-old Palestinian despite calls by the Palestinian Authority to refrain from violence. An international incident brews over Russia's strikes in Syria and alleged use of Turkish airspace, as NATO calls it a serious violation, and Erdogan warns Russia. And a Nobel Prize for Physics awarded to scientists from Japan and from Canada on groundbreaking work on neutrons, from discovering metamorphosis in the world of subatomic particles.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the News Today. Clashes continued today in Bethlehem following the funeral of a Palestinian teen killed a day before. Violence has been a major obstacle alongside a series of deadly attacks on Israelis over the past few days. And with us right now, live from Bethlehem, is military correspondent Jaffa Port in Bethlehem. Standing, Shai, for the last few hours, you've been experiencing a lot of riots. What is happening now?
Yes, well, Lucy, this violence continues. Basically, it is expected to continue well into the night, as it has for the past several days. We're talking about the Palestinian protesters are down at the end of the street. Right now, we're talking about several dozen, I would say. Throughout the day, it began with several thousand attending the funeral of the 13-year-old boy who was killed here yesterday. And you can see they're now beginning to approach and throw stones. This is how it has developed throughout the day. You have the IDF soldiers, including border police and other standard IDF soldiers nearer to us, near the Rachel's Tomb compound. They basically clash like this, with the soldiers firing tear gas canisters and other riot dispersal means, including non-lethal bullets, as the IDF defines it. In fact, the 13-year-old boy who was killed yesterday, the IDF has admitted that was a mistake. That was not the intention. Apparently, he was shot with one of those bullets, defined as non-lethal, and yet it led to his death nonetheless. Apparently, the IDF says it was aiming for another person standing next to him, one of the lead protesters. What we heard now was a tear gas canister being fired in the direction of the protesters. More on the past 24 hours in the following report. These were the scenes that broke out Tuesday following the funeral of 13-year-old Abdullah Rahman Ashadi. The Palestinian youth had been taking part in protests and riots held here Monday when he was shot by Israeli forces. He died later at hospital. We are here in downtown Bethlehem, where even now you can see clashes breaking out. On this street, you can see in the distance a group of about 1,000 Palestinians who are throwing rocks and other things towards the direction of the IDF soldiers, which are basically border patrol forces here. Every once in a while, they rush towards the Palestinians and then withdraw back. It's sort of a standoff, and this has been the situation for a number of days. This dynamic repeated itself throughout the day, as it has for several days now, with the soldiers stationed near the fortified area surrounding the traditional tomb of the biblical figure Rachel. Once in a while, the soldiers rush forward, firing their riot dispersal means, including tear gas and rubber bullets, before pulling back. The stream of stones and Molotov cocktails is nearly constant. Overnight, Israeli authorities introduced new measures intended to combat terror and violence. 2 homes belonging to terrorists were demolished in East Jerusalem. One of these belonged to Mohammed Naif Jabis, who ran over and killed a number of Israelis with a tractor in August of 2014 before being shot dead. The other home belonged to Jassin bin Mohammed Abu Jamal, who took part in the murder of Jews at a Jerusalem synagogue last November. He was also killed at the scene of that attack.
Yesterday at midnight, army forces came and raided the houses aggressively and assaulted the residents of the houses. They started hitting people and ordered us to evacuate immediately from the building without any pre-warning. We were just evacuated to the street.
The demolition of terrorist homes is a controversial tactic. Some in the Israeli security establishment feel it incites more violence than it prevents. The streets of Bethlehem the day after were certainly no quieter, despite calls by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to refrain from violence. There has been much talk in recent days of a third Palestinian popular uprising, a third intifada. Still, the protests here behind me do not include Fatah militants, that they do not include members of the Palestinian security services who are armed with automatic weapons. That would be the critical factor for many in the Israeli security establishment. Still, for now, no one knows when this violence will end. Shai Ben Ari, I-24 News, Bethlehem.
And Shaiba Nari, we're getting back to you right now. We've been talking a lot about the security coordination between the Israelis and the Palestinians in the last few days. Where are the Palestinian security forces in Bethlehem and in the West Bank? Are they any active in preventing the violence in the West Bank?
That's a good question, Lucy. They are present here. We have seen them today driving through the streets of Bethlehem. They're basically in the area around the Palestinian protesters there. They have a very significant presence there. It cannot be said, unfortunately, that they are doing much to prevent these protests and riots from taking place. That was actually the order they received from the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, yesterday, who called on his own security forces to calm down the situation, and also called on the Palestinian public to refrain from violence and to avoid giving Israel any excuse, as he put it, to incite violence, basically putting the blame on Israel, but the responsibility on the Palestinian people. I'll repeat again, the Palestinian security services are present here in Bethlehem, as they always are. It's difficult to say that they are doing much to prevent these protests from taking place as they continue another night.
Yes, thank you very much, Aya Ben-Arin. Take care of yourself there. And with me right now here in the studio is former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Dani Ayalon. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And also former Palestinian Minister Ashraf Al-Ajami. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Mr. Al-Ajami, obviously the last few days been really, really hard on both sides, the Palestinians and the Israelis. Where is the Fatah movement in the last few days? What is happening inside the Palestinian Authority, seeing what is happening on the streets of the West Bank?
I think Fatah movement is in the side of the what happens, especially if we speak about what happens in Ramallah and Qalandia, other places. Fatah movements is there, but they can't avoid any kind of participation of at least public demonstrations and something like that. But Fatah movement had a decision not to participate of any kind of using weapons or maybe shooting.
And though, like you're saying, that we heard Mahmoud Abbas saying to the Palestinians, we are against violence. This violence only gives Israel excuses to this specific situation. But on the ground, we are not seeing that these young people who are going and throwing stones and taking an active part in this violence, they are not listening to President Mahmoud Abbas.
Yes, of course. There is a big pressure on people after the provocation in the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Holy Square in East Jerusalem. And the Palestinian Authority cannot prevent people to at least release this pressure. So they let them release a few pressure of that, the situation, the circumstances. All the Palestinian public feels that the situation is very complicated, very hard for them to bear, especially after what happens in East Jerusalem. Because of that, the Palestinian Authority tries to make some kind of balance between people who want to express their anger
and the people who are trying to maybe reach another solution.
On the other time, to keep security and to keep the situation calm.
You know, if I'm looking at the situation right now, I'm seeing that this is starting to deteriorate by the day. It seems that we are really, I don't like to use this cliche, but we are really on the brink of a third intifada, or even a war, an open war between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We can blame a lot of things, but also where Israel is right now in this specific situation, because seeing this mess on the streets doesn't put Israel in a really convenient situation in front of the international community.
Absolutely, and the Israeli government is trying to do its best to bring the violence down and actually to go back to the status quo before the violence started. I think that with the end of the high Jewish holidays, maybe the friction will come down on that sense. And also, I hope that there will be some calls on all sides not to get things out of control because everybody will lose. For instance, the Israeli government just in the last 3-4 days arrested 20 Jews who are suspected of violence. So we are trying to do our best, and at the same time, of course, we've had these unfortunate terror attacks in Jerusalem and in the West Bank as well. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to do our best.
So let's go right now to our diplomatic correspondent, Eli Ochenberg, who has more on the reactions from the Israeli establishment on the latest surge in violence. Good evening, Eli. So, Eli, we're seeing that the Prime Minister is just for the last few days is in a lot of cabinet meetings, security meetings about what to do and how to start dealing with this situation, because it seems that Israel cannot find the correct, let's say, solution to this deterioration in the last, let's say, 6 days.
Yes, Lucy, well, after a few days of harsh criticism by right-wing factions over the way Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is handling or not handling the recent escalation in violence, tonight the leaders of the settlement movements are arriving at his Jerusalem office to discuss the expected plan to reduce tensions and, maybe more important than that, punishment mechanism or retaliation mechanism. They demand to be much stronger, and we've seen them camping out outside of his Jerusalem residence since Friday, and last night we've seen a mass demonstration again in protest of his lack of handling this situation. And we could have spotted in this demonstration some members of his own Likud party, and as you can imagine, that caused many inner tensions. And just let me remind you that these right-wing factions are the ones that were very happy to see the establishment of this narrow right-wing government. Back then, they did not want any centralization factors in this government, and now they're being tested. Its strength or lack of it is being tested. But let's see in the next report what happened today in Jerusalem in the last couple of days of harsh protests against Prime Minister Netanyahu. The deteriorating security situation is creating many challenges for the Israeli government, but almost at the same pace of the escalation in violence, tensions grow within the coalition. After a long, stormy cabinet meeting late Monday, the political bickering continues as the vocal and public criticism by right-wing forces from within the government were firmly tackled Tuesday morning by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon while touring the West Bank.
The emphasis of this visit was active defense of the roads. A large proportion of the attacks are carried along the roads, and we agreed here on a plan, very serious, in which we will deploy cameras not only on the ground, but also in the air, along all the roads in the West Bank, with an operations room and communications.
In light of the situation, there is a significant buttressing of forces in the field, which I hope will bring additional security, will cool the situation, and will end the escalation, and of course, a contention of intelligence activities to prevent attacks.
The rage among right-wing factions camping out here outside the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem since Friday culminated Monday night in a mass demonstration joined by political figures, some nonetheless from Netanyahu's Likud party. But even the newly approved series of measures to counter the recent wave of terror weren't enough to please the hawkish leaders, demanding an even firmer policy.
We demand the Prime Minister change the security policy, that he end this freeze, this racism targeting only Jews on construction in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria. The terrorists have to understand that terrorism does not pay.
The current reality is that for long months, traveling on the roads, even staying in the settlements, has become intolerable, and this has to come to an end. Another matter is the settlement enterprise. There is a de facto gap in the area. There is not even any planning for construction, never mind construction itself. And there should be an end to this unbearable reality regarding the settlements.
This narrow, unstable right-wing government is facing one of its biggest tests yet, as its members struggle to find someone to blame for the latest uprising. Anyone but themselves.
You know, Ambassador Ayalon, I'm watching this this table that we just saw with the Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is a right-wing government. I'm trying to imagine if these events were happening in a center right-wing government or in a left-wing government, this country would have, like, the government would have been fired 10,000 times because the right would say, here, you're bringing more blood to the streets. What is happening to the narrow right-wing government that Benjamin Netanyahu fought so much for?
Well, you are probably right, Lucy, and we remember what happened in the past, especially after the Oslo, 93 to 95, everything that led, unfortunately, to the assassination of former late Prime Minister Rabin.
Yes.
But this is what proves, I think, the axiom, which is that only the right can make peace. Because when the right makes the concessions, the left is supporting it.
Yes.
But when the left makes the concessions, the right is attacking it, and we know what happens. So I think this is a missed opportunity.
The problem is that we're not talking about concessions. We're talking about violence. We are talking about terror on the streets of Jerusalem. If I'm trying to imagine if Isaac Herzog would have won the elections and this would have happened right now, Isaac Herzog probably would have been pushed to resign from his office.
I think you're right. And this is why I think this is a lost opportunity for Abbas not to heed the call from Netanyahu. Because I believe that only a right-wing government can make peace. And it's not a secret also that Netanyahu is trying to enlarge his bases of coalition. He would like Mr. Bougie Herzog to join in as a foreign minister, and also to work on a platform of how to jumpstart the negotiations with the Palestinians.
Mr. Al-Ajami, just one sentence from you. Is the Palestinian Authority planning to maybe intervene more in the upcoming days to prevent more violence?
Yes, of course. This is the decision of the leadership. President Mahmoud Abbas said it clearly that the security services must come down the street and prevent people to be to attack and to be attacked also from the Israeli side.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for this, and thank you very much for being with me. And right now we're going to another burning issue here in the Middle East. We move to Syria, where the U.S. and Russia remain unable to find common ground. The latest reports suggest Moscow has thus far refused to respond to an American proposal to coordinate their military efforts against the Islamic State in order to avoid a mishap. The possibility of a major incident is rising, as I-24 News correspondent Charles Biblizer outlines in this next report.
Russian jets continue to pound targets in Syria as uncertainty caused by the fog of war has triggered a first international incident. NATO member Turkey accused Moscow Tuesday of violating its airspace for the second time in 48 hours, alleged incursions that drew a prompt and terse response.
There was a very difficult ultimatum which was given due to Russia's behavior. We cannot tolerate these actions.
This is exactly what we were afraid of, that incidents, accidents may create dangerous situations.
Although Russia has agreed to talks with Ankara to avoid what it described as misunderstandings, the Kremlin seems to have its own agenda. While Moscow appears to have indeed hit numerous Islamic State assets, Syrian rebels fighting the Assad regime maintain they are likewise being targeted. The U.S., which is leading its own coalition in Syria, denounced Russia's unilateralism.
It's dangerous, provocative, and it can cause accidents.
Washington continues to doubt the Kremlin's stated military objectives.
Their approach, which is to support Assad rather than a political transition, and meanwhile fight the opponents of Assad of all different kinds, is doomed to fail.
The Pentagon has reportedly suggested air-to-air protocols aimed at preventing a mishap, as the former Cold War foes carry out rival strikes. But instead of heeding Washington's warning, Moscow is leaving the door open for an expanded campaign.
I heard the statement of the Prime Minister of Iraq that he would be interested in the Russian Air Force helping with the destruction of terrorist positions on Iraqi territory.
While no formal request has yet been made, Russia already established a center in Iraq where it is coordinating with Baghdad and Tehran. As the West calls for a joint effort to combat IS, it is Russia that appears to be dictating the terms of engagement between the parties and, more significantly, in the skies and on the ground.
And with me right now here in the studio is Dr. Baruch Gurevich, expert on Russian affairs at the Haifa University. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. You know, the whole intervention of Russia in the Middle East is a mystery. Or maybe it's not a mystery. Maybe Russia has, let's say, one target. And like if I'm putting it or I'm taking or I'm quoting Benjamin Netanyahu's answer to CNN when they asked him why he didn't intervene in all the Russia-Ukraine conflict, he said, well, this is not our job, especially that maybe in the near future we're about to have a border with Russia. And he just continued talking. This sentence, having a border with Russia in the north, maybe this is the target of Russia to just take control in the Middle East or take control on Syria and change the balance?
Definitely not. I think your interpretation to what the Prime Minister said is a very specific one, because he said in the second sentence was, we have many more things to take care than this issue. And he said it specifically about the Crimea issue. Now, Bibi, our Prime Minister, I think, understands what's Putin's involvement in the Middle East, in Syria. And I think that you defined it as a mystery. I hate to be the spoiler. It's not a mystery.
So what
you have here a political move on the part of Putin, in which the emphasis now is, one, to save Assad. And when you see where are the airstrikes, are basically, if I may interpret it, is wherever the Syrian headquarters is asking the Russian to attack, because those are weak spots, which are not always against ISIS, it's against other opposition.
But they're not basically bombing IS, they're bombing the Free Syrian Army, which means that they're getting into a war that they were not supposed to get in.
No, that's exactly, they acted, if I may say, yes, on the invitation of the Syrian headquarters. Now, from his point of view, if you can see the results of it, that there are all talks that because of the attacks, made the opposition in Syria unite, will get together. By the way, Putin is interested in the unity of the opposition because of a different reason, and he said that he would like to have election in Syria in which the opposition will participate. Those will be the election for a parliament. He said it a few weeks ago, and I can say I follow whatever he says. Usually, he means it.
I want to just, to join to this conversation. With us is right now Laura Wales, journalist who's right now in Istanbul. Laura, maybe I'm wrong also in this, because in this maybe view, because if I'm seeing the Turkish, we're looking right now at this specific situation, and they're seeing the intervention of Russia, and they're getting in the middle of the intervention of Russia. Why? Maybe they can take it as, maybe it's the payback that we're getting right now from Bashar al-Assad that waited for the opportunity to hit us.
Well, certainly Turkey has probably been the fiercest critic of Assad since the beginning of the Syrian civil war. They want nothing more than to see him gone. But their hands are pretty much tied right now, both economically and with the civil strife they have going on, and also the November 1st elections. So they can't do much right at this time. But certainly if Russia were to do something to something in their airspace or to one of their jets, they would rely on NATO to come in and help them. That's obviously not a scenario that most people want to see. It's a showdown between NATO and Russian, potentially Syrian and Iranian and Hezbollah officials as well.
Do you agree with that, Dr. Bogle?
I just want to correct one item.
Yes.
When Erdogan was in Moscow just recently, he met Putin, and when he came out from the meeting with Putin, he said that at this stage, Assad may stay in power.
Like he changed his position
Definitely, and because there is a kind of an understanding with the United States that for the time being, Assad will stay. Phase 2, when will be election to the parliament, etc., someone will substitute Assad.
But you know what, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, you know what history taught us, that the Turkish are not forgetting that fast, even if they're saying that they're forgetting and they put it behind.
Well, it's true that President Erdogan not so long ago said that it's possible that Assad could be part of a political transition, but that was under pressure from Russia and even Western allies that have acquiesced most recently. But then again, President Erdogan in Brussels today reiterated that there must be regime change in Syria. Turkey's not in a position of power or strength at this point. This is on their border. They have 2 million Syrian refugees, and it's very likely that if this continues, there might be more refugees, and that is why right now he is in Brussels, because the EU really wants Turkey to take on more of the Syrian refugees.
Yes, Laura Wells, thank you very much for this one. Last sentence from you. How should Russia deal with this, seeing the situation of the refugees?
The refugees now in Europe serves the interest of Russia. As it will get worse in Europe from the point of view of refugees, Putin will get more support from the Western European countries to do whatever he can do in Syria to stabilize the situation. By the way, he counts on it. And when just a week ago was a meeting with Merkel, Holland, on the Ukrainian president talking about the Ukraine, and Putin came out quite nicely from this meeting.
He's coming out quite nicely from all this entire situation, and everything is working for his side. Dr. Grigorevich, thank you very, very much for being with me in this part.
Thank you.
And we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes break with live footage from Bethlehem. Another day of clashes in Bethlehem followed the funeral of a 13-year-old Palestinian, despite calls by the Palestinian Authority to refrain from violence. An international incident brews over Russia's strikes in Syria and alleged use of Turkish airspace, as NATO calls it a serious violation, and Erdogan warns Russia. And the Nobel Prize for Physics awarded to scientists from Japan and from Canada on groundbreaking work on neutrons, from discovering metamorphosis in the world of subatomic particles. Welcome back to the news today. Now we're going to Yemen. The country's prime minister escaped unarmed today when a rocket attack was launched at a hotel in the southern city of Aden. The attack comes after the return of the premier and other ministers after spending 6 months in exile in Saudi Arabia. Maya Margit has the latest.
This was the scene in Aden today. A series of explosions rocked a hotel and 2 buildings in the Yemeni city being used by the government and loyalist soldiers. Yemeni Vice President and Prime Minister Khaled Baha, as well as other government officials, managed to escape unharmed. But at least 15 Saudi-led coalition troops and pro-government fighters were killed. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility. In a statement released on Twitter, the group said, "In a blessed operation facilitated by God, 4 martyrdom operations targeted a gathering of Saudi, Emirati, and Yemeni officers." In the chaos of civil war afflicting Yemen, IS has attempted to present itself as a credible alternative to other Islamist groups present in the country, such as Al-Qaeda. But officials in Yemen have insisted the Houthis were behind the attacks, the biggest to target the government since it retook Aden from the Iran-backed rebels in July. This because the Al Qasr Hotel has been the base of Yemeni President Abdrabbu Mansur Hadi since he returned to Aden last month after 6 months of exile. Houthi backers have demanded the UN investigate Saudi-led airstrikes, which have already killed nearly 5,000 people in the past 6 months. Nevertheless, a draft resolution that would see an independent UN probe into the ongoing airstrikes was shot down by Saudi Arabia earlier this week. Instead, Riyadh presented another resolution, which will see Yemen set up its own inquiry. Rights groups slammed the decision as unacceptable.
6 months of unremitting violence in Yemen have left at least 505 children dead, 702 children injured. These are conservative figures since 26 March when the conflict escalated. On average, 8 children a day have been killed or maimed since the start of this conflict 6 months ago.
The Houthis have also condemned the coalition, comprised of Arab states, for alleged war crimes. They say their seizure of Sana'a in September of last year and their spread throughout the country was part of a revolution against the corrupt Yemeni government bound to Gulf monarchies.
And with me right now here in the studio, Senior Middle East Analyst Ali Waqid. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
Just a few days ago, you were sitting here and you explained to me that the situation is still volatile in Yemen and maybe people are misleading what is happening. And this is exactly what happened, misleading the situation, misunderstanding the situation. And this is exactly maybe even the Prime Minister and his ministers misread the map.
And 2 weeks ago, when we talked about Aden becoming stable and relatively calm, I said that there are here and there some clashes between the forces loyal to President Hadi and Al-Qaeda affiliated group. And I don't know whether the proclamation of responsibility of the Islamic State today is accurate or no, but this shows that the jihadist groups in the south of Yemen are still operating and are insisting that they are part of the equation, and it's not a bilateral confrontation between the Houthis and between the Saudis and President Hadi, but in the middle, in between, there are the jihadist group Islamic State and Al-Qaeda who do not appreciate neither those nor the others.
So when the Prime Minister and his ministers are coming back and they are facing this attack, they are calling the Saudis and asking them what? You knew about that and you sent us to our death?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Lucy, the Yemenite, even those who are supporting President Hadi, did not feel comfortable of being supported by foreign groups, and that the release or liberation of the southern parts of Yemen, Aden, and the surrounding was made by foreign forces. And the Saudis did believe that it would be very much useful if President Hadi and his cabinet will be back in Aden. Nobody expected that Aden became a paradise of calm and peace. But what we saw today show two things. If it is the Houthis that are behind the attack, they sent a clear message that we're still capable to strike whenever we want in the south. And if it is the Islamic State, it is the newcomer to the neighborhood, which is, I don't know, it is not welcomed for sure, but it can bring much more damage to the Saudi and to the Yemenite official effort to bring calm at least to this part of Yemen.
One sentence, what are the chances that Al-Qaeda just joined hands with the Islamic State?
For the moment, there is Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State everywhere are fighting each other. Al-Zawahiri and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi exchange insults in the Al-Qaeda, in the jihadist social media in the last day. I don't see them collaborating, but this means that both sides will try to prove that they are dominating the ground by carrying out more and more attacks against the Houthis, but also against Hadi and his company.
Ali Waqid, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to Afghanistan. Controversy continues over the U.S. airstrike on a hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan, which today American commander in Afghanistan, General John F. Campbell, called a mistake. Campbell is also facing questions on Capitol Hill about how many troops should stay in Afghanistan after recent shows of victory from the Taliban. Campbell will testify before the Senate Armed Service Committee on whether he thinks the U.S. troop reduction planned after 2016 should be changed. And with me to explain to me if it is a mistake or wasn't a mistake is Amir Oren, defense and government analyst for Haaretz Daily newspaper. Good evening.
You remember Campbell's soup?
Yes, I remember.
So Afghanistan is now Campbell's soup because of General Campbell.
How did they made this mistake?
Well, General Campbell, when he met the press, and he emphasized that he's saving most of his answers to Congress, because Congress is his master, rather than the press, said that contrary to first reports, it turns out that the Afghanistan army asked for this sortie, for this firepower from the air. It was an AC-130, the Hercules gunship, which struck at the hospital. However, the Afghans did it through a special forces team that the Americans put with them. So the investigation is still ongoing. These are not the final results, but it is not as clear as it was in the beginning that Americans were to blame totally.
Now explain to me, please, Amir. I'm trying to understand when the United States tried to do its best to get out of Afghanistan, to finish this war, to no more be involved in what is happening there in December 2014. How come they found themselves again in the same mud, but even now deeper?
It's very logical. As long as you are there, and the Taliban and the Haqqani network and all of the rest are dormant or seemingly have been oppressed, fine. But as soon as you leave, they wake up and it's all over again. You can't do it forever. These people live there. They are going to be there no matter how long outsiders come in, because the moment they leave, it all unravels, and you must have a political solution, not only a military one.
Of course you have to have a political solution, but that explains the situation. Maybe it's a test case. Maybe Afghanistan is a test case to what is happening in all the Middle East, because the minute that the United States tried to intervene and went out, like what happened in Iraq, the same thing just happened.
Yes.
So what, the Americans are not learning from their mistakes again?
They are learning from the mistakes, but there are political considerations, not only diplomatic, but political considerations involved. You know, all of this goes back to 1969 and what was called the Vietnamization of President Nixon. And this means that we, the Americans, will equip you, we will train you, we will advise you, but you people have to do the work yourselves. And as we saw in Iraq and in Syria with the opposition, the locals do not learn the trade so fast. And what is going to happen in Syria, and you touched on it before the break, is that boots on the ground are going to be Russian boots and the American firepower, and this combination may save the day.
How long it took the United States to get to democracy?
Democracy. First, they had to take the British rule out of the United States, and some of them are now thinking whether it was such a good idea.
Yeah, I think that it will take more in the Middle East. Mira Oren, thank you very much.
Lucy.
The Nobel Prize in Physics has been awarded to teams of scientists from Japan and Canada for a research project which aims to answer the ever-pressing question, what is the universe around us composed of? Meanwhile, the prize in medicine was given to a Chinese scientist who was more interested in the question of how humans can keep themselves safe from dangers down here. This is A big question here on Earth. Ayman Siksik has more.
Japan and Canada in an unpredictable alliance for science. This year's top Nobel Prizes for science went to Japanese and Canadian scientists for their work to reveal how neutrinos, nature's most elusive elementary particles, can expand our understanding of the universe around us. Feeling confused? Nobel Prize laureate Arthur MacDonald explains.
Well, we were able to show that neutrinos change from one type to the other as they travel from the core of the sun. In order to do this, we had to build a detector the size of a 10-story building, 2 kilometers underground.
The Nobel Committee for Physics noted the cooperation between MacDonald and his Japanese counterpart, Takaaki Kajita. This year's most prestigious prize in medicine has been given to Yu Tu, who led the discovery of a powerful drug against malaria. Tu shares the prize with Irish-born William Campbell and Japanese Satoshi Omura. Upon receiving the news, though, 84-year-old Tu proved that with age comes a sense of proportion.
It's nothing special. I've received many prizes. But for me, I'm not a person who pays more attention on honors. I think the more honors you have received, the more responsibilities you should take.
All eyes now will be on the Nobel Prize for Peace, to be announced this Friday. One of the contenders is Pope Francis, but estimates show the prize might go to another high-profile candidate, German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
And with me right now is Dr. Alex Coman, value creation expert at the Academic College of Tel Aviv. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And you are here to talk about a story that you really liked in the last few days, especially the images that came out of it.
Exactly. The half-naked human resources manager of Air France KLM fleeing over the fence to be saved by the police. Because it's a collision of bankrupt capitalism and bankrupt Marxism, and it's very photogenic. So
I didn't think that you're not going to love it. It's just
well, the reason it's first of all, the airline is called Air France KLM because both airlines were doing very poorly, competing with the low budget airlines, EasyJet and Ryanair. Mm-hmm. So they have great difficulty competing with these. So there's a big belief in capitalism that if we are two big lazy giants, if we merge together, we'll be one smarter giant, which doesn't happen.
You know, I'm trying to compare it. I want to think about it in like in my Israeli small local place. If El Al would have bankrupt, or how the biggest airline company gets to this situation?
By the way, airline has been losing a lot of money recently because most of us fly EasyJet or fly Turkish Airlines or some budget airlines, some European budget airlines, and if we fly, we don't fly El Al, we fly up.
Yes.
So that was El Al's way of competing against the budget airlines. So Air France KLM, I flew to Beijing with them, and it's difficult for them to compete. This time I'm flying Turkish to Beijing.
If you're talking that it is, let's say, a major problem that right now we have in all like airlines companies, what more companies can we talk about? If we spoke about El Al that tried to fight it with
there used to be Swiss Air. Now it's called Swiss because it went bankrupt. The UK had BOAC, which went bankrupt. So now you have BA, which is having a hard time. American Airlines went bankrupt. TWA is no longer with us. Pan American no longer with us. The big famous airlines are no longer with us. That's called creative destruction.
Creative destruction.
And then you have the unions, and they're becoming violent. So
becoming violent, and I believe that you don't like the word capitalism, and when capitalism just breaks, it just. Yes, we are seeing these images that Alex loves so much. Dr. Alex Coman, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Lucy.
American President Barack Obama is set to meet the families of the victims of Oregon massacre on Friday as the dispute around gun control and the right to carry arms heat up yet again and become a source of dispute between the Republican and the Democratic candidates for the 2016 presidential elections. I-24 News reporter Ur Shapira has more.
Another tragedy in the U.S. has re-triggered the fierce debate over gun control and the right to bear arms. This time the victim is little Michaela Dyer from Tennessee, only 8 years old, who was shot to death by her 11-year-old neighbor in a row over a puppy.
She was a happy little girl who was she was just always smiling. She was quiet, but she would always have a big smile on her face.
In the wake of last week's terrifying shooting at Oregon College, which resulted in 10 casualties, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton last Monday unveiled her own gun control plan to set up a national movement to counter the influence of the National Rifle Association, one of the strongest groups in America today.
It's the leading cause of death for young African American men, the second leading cause for young Hispanic men, the fourth leading cause for young white men. This epidemic of gun violence knows no boundaries, knows no limits of any kind.
However, Clinton's opponents from the Republican Party prefer to blame the people behind the guns rather than the weapons.
And you know, every time something happens, they blame. They don't blame mental illness, that our mental health care is out of whack, and all of the other problems. And by the way, it was a gun-free zone.
Candidate Jeb Bush outdid the others with his controversial response, which sparked sharp reactions in the political arena.
I had this challenge as governor, because we had, look, stuff happens, there's always a crisis, and the impulse is always to do something, and it's not necessarily the right thing to do.
The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution protects the right to bear arms, but more than 200 years after this bill was adopted by the U.S. Congress, the division between those who want to protect the rights under the Constitution and those who are mainly concerned about their security is still wide.
Let's talk about a big company. Better news for Facebook. The tech giant is set to launch a satellite in the second half of 2016 that will provide internet access to remote areas of Africa. Facebook will use European satellite operator communications and an Israeli satellite to get broadband internet to sub-Saharan Africa. The project is a part of Facebook's controversial Internet.org initiative, which critics have argued that is violating and creating a closed version of the internet.
We believe that connectivity is a human right, and that connectivity can't just be a privilege for some of the rich and powerful. It needs to be something that everyone shares. So one of the main things that we've done is we started working with Airtel to launch free basic internet services in Zambia. And for the first time, hundreds of thousands of people started to get access to some basic services for health, education, jobs, communication. And we start to hear some pretty amazing stories.
Yes, and with me right now here in the studio to explain to me a little bit more about the basic needs is Roy Goldenberg from technology reporter from Globes. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
So, Roy, let's try to understand. It looks really romantic. It looks beautiful. We're going to Africa. We're going to show them the real world technology. These people don't have what to eat, how they're going to actually get into Facebook and be active on Facebook if they are interested even in getting to Facebook.
So I think Facebook has 1.5 billion monthly active users, so they kind of get bored with them and they want more. So they're going to Africa to start and giving people the chance to see what it's the internet. And of course, there is a lot of things that you need to do before the internet, but you know, it's Facebook, it's a technology company, it's internet. Yes. They want the people to be there. Then they have the advertiser and they can sell ads for those people. So it's an ongoing mission for them.
You know, we're not talking about a developed country. We're talking about non-developed countries. We're talking about millions and millions of people that don't know maybe what enter on the computer means. What is the plan? What is the big plan? Because if you want to really start educating and maybe bringing internet, maybe you need to start from the basics.
So it's kind of two parts of for Facebook. The first part is going to places where there is already internet, but people don't know what it is because it's their salary is about $2-3 for a day, something really low. So in the data plans for the mobile carriers are really high. So they don't put their money there. They prefer, buy health and pills and food, of course. So the plan is to use mobile carriers with the internet.org. Zuckerberg talked about it, and give them a free internet basic. And it's kind of, they have Facebook there, of course, and Facebook Messenger, of course, and they have Wikipedia and sports scores and stuff like that, and weather, of course. And this is the one part. The other part that is relevant for the satellite deal is about giving internet to places there isn't internet at all.
Yes.
So they kind of beaming internet from the sky.
But we're watching that, if we're talking about satellite, we're watching that there is an Israeli angle to all the story.
Yeah.
How does Israel get into this?
Israel gets to every place. Yeah. So you have a Spacecom satellite communication. It's a company, a big company that already building a few satellites over the last years, and they're jointly working with Israel aerospace industry, and together they're building the what is called Amos 6. And they had talks about it with Facebook about 1 year or something like that, and they're checking. Facebook checked them and talking. Finally, they had the deal done, and the satellite will be in the sky for next year.
I'm trying to think if this deal will, Facebook is such a tech giant, and a lot of criticism is about Facebook and the way that it's controlling our lives. Is it another maybe part of the world that Facebook is trying to control?
They're trying to control it in a way that they're giving the people the basic internet, so people know that Facebook is behind those things, of course.
And they will get the basic information about the people that are getting.
Yeah, of course. Yes. And the second part is they getting the information because they will use Facebook and the Messenger, of course. And I guess WhatsApp and Instagram will be next.
Yes. Again, like I said, the beginning, they need bread before they need Facebook or internet. Rory, thank you very much for this. Thank you. A major ruling today on what companies like Facebook do with our data. The EU's top court ruled a key transatlantic data sharing deal is unveiled in light of spying revelations in the Edward Snowden scandal. The safe harbor deal was relied on by Facebook and others to move digital data between the EU and the US. The decision is being called a milestone in online privacy and calls into question how tech giants collect and manage online information of EU users. And right now with me is someone who is definitely, his privacy is only...
Not collecting anything.
Jonathan Reagan.
Evening.
Hello.
Hello.
All good?
All good. Yourself?
Yes.
Not so much for Liverpool, though.
Yeah, not so much for Liverpool.
Not so much for Liverpool.
Yep.
It wasn't so good this season and the last season that they sacked their manager, Brandon Rodgers. We should say to his defense, he was very, very close to bringing Liverpool their first championship 25 years ago, but almost is not good enough. And last season was not good, and this season was so-so. So they let him go. Who are the people in line now? As it seems, we have two big names. One is Jurgen Klopp, former manager of Borussia Dortmund. Second is Carlo Ancelotti, who was the manager of Real Madrid last season. Did not win anything last season with Real Madrid, but obviously a big coach. We see Jurgen Klopp took Borussia Dortmund to big heights, brought them a couple of German championships, German cups, took the team all the way to the Champions League final, and they're not as big financially as the Bayern Munichs, the Real Madrids, Barcelona. Therefore, Jurgen Klopp seems a favorite. Carlo Ancelotti also. Two big names. One of them will probably be the next Liverpool manager.
Okay, let's talk about the Olympics.
Yes, everybody thinks that while you do this big project, set up the Olympics, and there you're all good. But the example of Sochi can show us that it's not exactly like that, and if you don't have a plan for the future, you're in trouble. This is what the Olympic Village in Sochi looks like now, just a year and a half after the Russian city hosted the Winter Olympics. These were by far the most expensive Olympics in history. They cost $50 billion to Russia. This is what the Olympic Village looks now. Deserted, broken, things do not work. And the question is, what do you do with all these installations after the games? Of course, it's not only stadiums. In London, for example, they set up a neighborhood. People live there. But this
that would happen in Azerbaijan also.
Yes, and if you have a plan for these things for the future, that's good. If not, you're in trouble, as we see in this case.
So what kind of crazy sport do you have?
It's called free jumping. It's beautiful, and it took place in Santorini, which is also beautiful. And much to the joy of the locals, the winner came from Greece. His name is Dimitris Kirsanidis, and this is basically what the people do. They just it's a modern
They're jumping from one house to house.
Yes, a modern parkour. I would define it, and basically just the people jump. It's beautiful, and when it's done on Santorini on the cliff, right over the beach, it's even better.
Jonathan.
Yes.
You didn't ask me how am I if you missed coming here to the studio. Nothing
I said
today.
You asked me how I said you said all good. I said yes, and you?
And you didn't let me answer because I had a lot to answer, and now I don't have the time.
I didn't say, oh, I missed you so much. Oh, yes.
Jonathan Regev, thank you very much. They're yelling in my ear. We're going out for a small break and update from our news desk, and then we will be back. Welcome back to the news today. And yes, Charles, it's that time of the week again.
We have a slogan.
Yeah, we have a slogan. And with me right now here is I-24 News correspondent Charles Biblezer. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And also former member of Israeli Parliament Yesh Atid and political analyst Dov Lipman.
Good to be here.
Good evening. Gentlemen, of course, we are here to talk about the presidential race and about political issues in the United States. And it was a hectic week for everyone there, right, Charles?
Very hectic. Dov, am I going to take Trump? Am I going to take Trump again?
Take it off my chest.
Okay, I'll take Trump. Basically, a new poll just came out. The first poll in really quite a long time to show Donald actually not as the front runner. Ben Carson out ahead by about 7 points. A little skeptical as to the validity of it, given the fact that it's basically he will have bridged a major gap within a very small amount of time. And most of the other polls still do show Donald as a front runner. But the gap has shortened, and he doesn't seem to be progressing.
And that's the biggest point. A poll like that does seem a little bit to be extreme in terms of the jump, but he's not going any further. And if anything, we're seeing the numbers shrinking. NBC Wall Street Journal in New Hampshire, it's gone down from 16 points last month to just 5 points now. In Iowa, down from a much larger lead. So even though he's still leading, he's not going further.
I see him even less enthusiastic in his, let's say, press. Help me, looking for the word. Yes, and all the statements that he's giving. He's like. It's like he is tired.
Well, he's almost like, there's a battery and a wind up inside of him. He gets wound up by how well he's doing. If he's doing great and he's in the news and everybody wants him, so he gets out there in these rallies and he boasts about how well he's doing. When it's not happening, and there's a poll now that shows someone else in the lead, he can't get up anymore and make the statements he was making. So, you're going to see him, I think, taking a step back, but most importantly, all those single-digit people, as they back out, where is their support going to go? And Donald Trump knows that
the support is going to go
to somebody else.
To somebody else.
And he's just not growing any further. So that takes the air out as well.
And I think you raised a very important point, because I think we're going to start seeing the field whittle down significantly. There are 8 candidates right now that are polling on a national average at 3% or lower. This is unsustainable in the long run. Even if you look at a guy like Rand Paul, who has a real grassroots following, he only raised $2.5 million over the course of the last 3 months. It's an unsustainable campaign, and there are guys who are doing a lot worse than that.
What is Ben Carson doing so good?
So I think it's consistency. He has his message. People enjoy listening to him. He's an outsider without the freaky nature to it, and people are attracted to it. Listen, I have to be honest with you. I watch him. There's something that pulls you towards just the way he's speaking, intellectual. He makes you feel like he's smarter than you are. He's smart, and people want to have a smart president. It's there. I don't know.
But the smart president is actually saying what he said about Muslims?
No, so that was a gaffe, but it's a gaffe that he seems to have gotten through. I was here soon after that happened, and I thought that might be the end. He somehow managed to weather that storm.
Gaining support even.
Yes.
Gaining support even. To a degree, it did help him. But really, I think really what is going to start happening, especially as a lot of the establishment figures who aren't polling well get out of the race, there are going to be establishment figures that start to really pick up. And you know that I happen to think that Marco Rubio at this point is a major contender. In a new poll, he's polling third in the race, more than double digits now at 11%. He's got this kind of like stallion nature to him where he gallops and gallops and gallops, a thoroughbred, and at the end people start really falling back, and all of a sudden, wow, he's out in front.
Not making a lot of noise, not making all the buzz, but remember, there's going to be 10 debates. This is a long process, and all the experts who have been in there before, meaning campaign managers in the past, say consistency, stay on message, and he is doing that.
The fact that he is Hispanic is helping him?
Probably, it will certainly help him to a degree, but Dov mentioned debates, and I think maybe this is a good time to transition into the Democratic side, given that the debate is a week away, October the 13th. This being said, it's been a good couple of weeks for Hillary Clinton. She's seen a little bit of a bump in the polls, nothing major, but at this point, anything to weather the storm and bring the momentum ahead necessarily instead of going back, and back. So, for example, if you go back 2-3 weeks ago, there was a series of 3 consecutive polls that showed her out in front by 7, 8, 14 points ahead of Sanders. Now, the last 3 major national polls, she's out by about 18, 20, 21 points. Wow. It's not the 50 points that she was at 6 months ago, but anything is good. Any good news is welcomed from the Hillary campaign at this stage.
The interesting point and the fear for Hillary is certainly the Biden factor. And you look at the polls. For example, a poll in Iowa: Hillary Clinton 47, Bernie Sanders 36. You bring Joe Biden into the picture, she goes down to 33, and he's at 22. Biden without even running yet. So that's a factor, and it's just been revealed that Joe Biden himself was the one who leaked the information that his son's dying wish, was that he should run. I, again, as an outsider looking at this, understanding, I think he wants to run. He's waiting for the right moment. He'll lose something by not being in that debate. He will. He'll be missing a major stage.
According to sources, he will not be there.
He will not be there.
Vegas.
Right.
I want to, it's interesting that it's working good for Hillary Clinton, although we talked that all the email scandal is actually taking her, like, steps back. Do you want to say maybe that the American people forgot the email scandal, or they're waiting for her around the corner and just the minute that she will start stepping up, she will go down again?
Well, I think personally these things are like a roller coaster to some degree. You're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs. But for example, like, I don't think that she's really benefiting from Bernie Sanders' demise, so to speak. So like when I look at Sanders, he still seems to be doing very, very well. He drew 20,000 people to a Boston convention center over the weekend. And just to compare it to Barack Obama, when he spoke at the same venue 8 years ago, he only drew 10,000 people. It also came out that Sanders over the last 3 months raised $26 million to Hillary's $28 million. That's astounding.
What is his magic?
Grassroots.
The grassroots, speaking to the base and speaking truth. And people see truth. People see, they view him as an outsider, even though he's not really an outsider.
The good grandpa that you want
I think it's going to be
like,
fascinating, Lucy, to see the two of them on the stage.
I hope that if he will be elected, he won't see what I just said. But he looks like
But on the stage, that's where I think you're going to see the difference. Somebody who's just as a guy in your living room talking to you, or a politician like Hillary is. It'll be fascinating to see what happens in that debate and how it plays out. And Hillary has gone on the offensive about the things you mentioned about, on the emails, on Benghazi, on things that could be scandals. She's changed her tone. She's going against those, building off Bill, who came out and played the victim card.
And just of the day.
Correct. She's taking from that and she's saying, you're out to get me, everyone's out to get me. She's being offensive, and an offense works.
Now, I want to take you to a big issue that the United States has been experiencing or dealing with for a long, long time now, and it's the gun control. We already spoke about it in this edition tonight. How come this issue of the gun control in the United States is not being actually legalized in a proper way? And how come the Democrats are not taking, or maybe Barack Obama is not making it, let's say, the last subject or the last big issue that he will be handling before he's stepping down?
Well, Hillary certainly jumped on it. She gave an emotional, she teared up and she cried as she talked about some of the things that have been happening, and they're going to use that. The issue is, it's a constitutional issue in the United States. There is a strong, strong gun lobby that says that it's not the guns that are killing, it's the people that are killing. This is the debate. I grew up remembering this when I was in elementary school, 30 years ago, this being talked about. If things continue to happen, though, again, if something like it happened in Oregon, can other events happen, it is going to raise more to the front of this issue, of the debate, of the elections. By the way, if anything major along gun lines happens in a general election, that swings people more to the Democratic side, it'll be there.
How much the racial issue is going to be maybe also a big issue in the next elections?
I think it's going to be a big issue depending on whether, for example, like if Carson remains out in front, if minorities are there at the end of the day, it's going to be an issue. And it also depends on the climate within America. Things have calmed down, the racial tensions, for a while, whether it was in Ferguson, in Baltimore. Don't forget, there were major, major riots there. But at this stage right now, I think that race played a big factor in the previous two elections. I'm hoping that issues more than race come to the forefront this time.
But just to point out that the front runners on the Republican side, you have an African-American, Hispanic-American, and a woman. Yeah. That's something which is different than we usually would see it. So if it does play a role at all, it shifts a little bit to the other side.
I just want to tell you that for the last few weeks, I started watching Scandal. And every single time since the minute that I started watching Scandal, and I'm watching somebody from the Republicans or the Democrats are appearing on TV, I just can't help wondering what is happening behind the scenes. But still, it's a TV show. Nothing on TV is real, except you guys. Thank you very, very much.
Pleasure. Emma?
Yes, you are. Okay, so we're still here, and we're still talking about the United States. For all candidates, achieving likability is one of the top aims in the campaign. And Hillary Clinton is no different, although she has a problem with likability. New York correspondent Daniel Ziri has a look at how she's losing up a bit on the campaign trail.
Please give a warm welcome to Hillary Clinton, ladies and gentlemen.
Hillary is trying to be, well, hilarious. The Democratic candidate has made several late-night comedy appearances in the past few weeks, starting with The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, in which she addressed the elephant in the room, Donald Trump.
And so he's making the most out of it. I'm having a good time watching it. I find it...
Hoping perhaps it will distract voters from the very serious email scandal she's facing, Clinton tried her chance at humor once again this week, this time on Saturday Night Live, where she poked fun at herself playing a bartender.
Oh, you go ahead. I'm gonna have one more drink. Hey, bartender, keep them coming.
As her poll numbers have been dropping in favor of her opponent Bernie Sanders, comedy seems to be Hillary's latest strategy. A much-needed move to relax the 68-year-old former First Lady's perceived character. Last week, she made another attempt at appealing to millennials and let herself be interviewed by actress Lena Dunham. The next polls will tell if Clinton's detailed plan to show more authenticity will be enough to turn the tide of public opinion. But according to many communication experts, 6 months into the campaign, it may just be too late.
Hilarious. She's really, really, really funny. And with me right now, someone who's obviously really funnier than her is Ayman Siksik. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy. And we're going to talk about a book that really is funny. It's,
Go ahead.
It's Riyad Sattouf's The Arab of the Future. This is a graphic novel that was first published in French and was hugely successful in the French market. Now it's being published for the first time in English. And boy, I thought I had a strange and unique childhood. That was until I read Riyad Sattouf's autobiography.
We all are so, you know, interested in ourselves that we're forgetting that other people have like much more interesting stories than us.
And we're convinced that our childhood was special, but Riyad Sattouf was born in France to a Syrian father and a French mother. Now, the father was a pan-Arabist academic, and he traveled throughout the Arab world, specifically in Libya and Syria, and took his family with him, and he had teaching jobs in these countries. Now, he had these dreams about the Arab world and the Middle East, how one day the Arab nations would unite and create one large, powerful Arab entity. Didn't work out too well, we have to say, looking back now. But
yep.
And this novel, which is actually the first of a trilogy that he's writing about his childhood, the second one is already published in French, and the translation in English will probably follow suit. So the first one focuses on his childhood in Libya. That's why you see Gaddafi there in the background, staring at the child who you can see waving to Gaddafi. And that's really brings forward the point and the feel of the book. It's very innocent. It's told through a child's eyes.
And he was working in Charlie Hebdo.
That's right. Riyad Sattouf, who's a very, very well-known filmmaker and cartoonist in France, was a long-time contributor to Charlie Hebdo before the attacks. He left the magazine before the tragic attacks happened last year, but he was one of the most well-known characters, both in Charlie Hebdo and in French cinema and cartoons for a while. So he really has a very significant impact in French culture.
Basically, what he's trying to say, he's trying to say that, you know, we have a future. Arabs are not what you think, and see from where we're going. Even if you have a like harsh childhood, you can grow up okay.
That's right. And also I think he's trying to tell us you don't know everything you think you know about the Arab world. And just like any good graphic novel that has a lot of dark humor in it, no one comes out of it looking good, especially not the Arab world here. So even though it's told through humor, it's creating a lot of scandal in the Arab countries right now.
Ayman Siksik, thank you very, very much for this.
Thank you, Lucy.
One of these days, maybe very, very soon, we will be inviting you on your own novel. Very soon, out. And that's it for tonight. We will be here again. Good night.